Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. We're very fortunate that here at the World Food Prize Borlaug Dialogue this week, we have this wonderful array of leaders and experts from around the world. Today, because Ebola has become such a critical issue happening in Western Africa, we have gathered some of those leaders with us to speak with press. And we do have this being webcast today, and we will be taking questions both from people here in the audience and also online via Twitter at WFPQA. So, to my left, we have Ambassador Kenneth Quinn, who is president of the World Food Prize Foundation. To his left, we have Dr. Kanayo Nwanze, the president of the United Nations International Fund for Agricultural Development. Next, we have Minister Florence Chenoweth, who is the Minister of Agriculture from Liberia, and Minister Joseph Sam Sesay, the Minister of Agriculture, Forestry, and Food Security from Sierra Leone. With that, I will turn it over to Ambassador Quinn to make a couple of opening remarks, and then we will go ahead and take questions.
All my 15 years at the World Food Prize, I've always been anxious to have as much press attention as possible. And this is one time when I wish we weren't. President Nwanze gave a very powerful and stirring message about the Ebola crisis. Minister Florence Chenoweth is my very good friend for many, many years. Minister Sesay from Sierra Leone is a new friend, but our hearts go out to them for the terrible crisis that their countries and Guinea are facing. And, of course, the issue in the short term every day is about human health and protection. But President Nwanze gave what I believe is the clarion call that should be heard everywhere about the implications of this disease for food production, for agriculture. And it's a call not just about this disease, but about the potential of other, both human and animal diseases, and what their impact can be as we face what the World Food Prize has defined as the greatest challenge in human history. Can we produce and distribute enough food to feed 9 billion people in the next 35 years? Dr. Norman Borlaug, who is the inspiration for us, and as we're concluding the Borlaug Centennial, would share that sadness, I know, and would at the same time, I believe, join me in urging the attention of political leaders all around the world to first and foremost be of assistance to Liberia and Sierra Leone, and also to bring the full power of science and policy and attention to preparing for what the future may hold in terms of implication for agriculture. So, Your Excellency, President Nwanze, I turn to you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Quinn. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, media, thank you for this opportunity to interact with you. I would rather defer any formal statements I have in preference to answering your questions. Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind, I will pass on to Dr. Florence Chenoweth.
Thank you very much. As I said to someone earlier this morning, so what is it like in Liberia? And I said, well, everything, no matter whether it is going to church or talking about this event or that, it all comes down at the end to Ebola. So instead of making such a long formal statement, I would just tell you that my country had gone through a long period of unrest, starting from 1980 and not ending until we finally had a democratic government in place in 2006. So when you do the math, I hope you will come up with some years close to what we get as Liberians, and not this talk about 14 years, because from 1980 to 2006 is not 14 years. So after those long periods, we started off determined, because we are just that kind of a resilient people, determined to rebuild our totally broken country. The gains that we achieved, or some of you may know in terms of growth figures, I can tell you now that it is almost all wiped out. And when Ebola is contained in our country, we will virtually be starting all over again, including building roads, because there were no roads when we took over and started to rebuild in 2006. There were no roads, no bridges, no public buildings with roof that we could use, nothing. Infrastructure was all gone over those 24 plus years. Today, we've rebuilt them, but the roads are gone. So I will wait to take your questions and answer them from there.
And Minister Sesay, would you like to say anything, or shall we go into questions?
Well, actually, I think I need to share some bits of information as to what Ebola is like in West Africa. We, that is Sierra Leone and Liberia, do share a similar background of a long period of rebel war that has destroyed a lot of people, and things, and killed a lot of people. That has taken us way back in terms of development. We ended in Sierra Leone by January 2002, the rebel war, and we started rebuilding our country. However, it was not easy to recover, but since the current president, Dr. Ernest Bai Koroma, took over the reins of authority in 2007, we have seen significant progress taking place in Sierra Leone in terms of the economy in general. Projected, it has been growing at a 2-digit. In fact, Sierra Leone is one of the 3 fastest growing economies in the world before the Ebola came. So you can imagine where we were, 2-digit. And the infrastructure, especially roads, have significantly improved. Food security also, to the extent that if you look at world statistics, Sierra Leone is about the 7th fastest growing in terms of food production in the world. I do have a booklet and I made reference to that. Electricity has significantly improved. So generally, the economy and every other thing has significantly improved under the current regime. We had finished the first 5-year program, 2007 and 2008 to 2012, and we are now implementing a program as ambitious as it may be to transform Sierra Leone into a middle income country by 2035. We've been making that progress. Now, unfortunately, in May this year, the Ebola started. It came from somebody who went to Guinea, where it was, and came to Sierra Leone. And it came to the place where we produce the most of what we export in terms of agricultural produce, that is cocoa and coffee. They constitute about 90% of what we export in terms of agriculture. Incidentally, it came at a time also in May, which was the peak of the cultivation season. So definitely that has negatively impacted on agriculture. To the extent that today, instead of a projected 11.3% annual growth rate for 2014 in terms of the economy, we later deflated it to 7%, and today we are only anticipating something like 3% growth rate from a 2-digit. It's very serious. We are also faced with a serious problem of employment now, because all this work that was taking place in terms of infrastructure, agriculture, we have created incentive packages for large-scale investments, especially foreign direct investments, which I passed through cabinet in 2008, to the extent that we have about 80 companies that have come in to invest in agriculture. In Sierra Leone, a lot of this has been abandoned, created unemployment for a lot of people, especially the youth. So the impact really is very serious. And I wouldn't mind to share, because I have a lot of telling figures on the situation, the impact of the Ebola in Sierra Leone. Suffice it to say that in Sierra Leone, 2/3 of the people are farmers, okay? And about 55% of the people are poor. So definitely, logically, the majority of the poor people are farmers, because farmers constitute the bulk of the people, and the bulk of the people are poor, so definitely. Now, with Ebola, that has exacerbated the situation. Let me say that I think one would wait for the questions, and if you are interested in more details, we will share with you. Well, let me conclude by saying that the issue of isolation would not be a solution. Isolating the countries of Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone under the circumstance has a more devastating effect. We are talking about the movement of goods and people. Some of these are humanitarian. Even the very items that are being taken to our countries with this isolation is being negatively impacted upon. It is affecting the economy. It is having a spillover effect on other neighboring countries like Kenya. Now they are talking about the impact. And even now, as we see here in America, watching the TV, the problem is here. You cannot stop your people from coming. You don't know which of them has really got affected in any of these countries. The best for me is to fight the war where the war is, and not to wait until it comes here. I think that is the strong message I want to convey, that let us, please, we are appealing to you to really support us so that we can stop this. This is not like the rebel war we had before, in which we fought among ourselves. No, this is something that came not from us. It just happened like that. And this is a very invisible enemy. Unlike the rebel war, wherein you knew where they were, you will hear the gunshots, the rebel might just be next to you. So that is where I would want to stop. And as I said, if you want more information, I can email you the information. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have questions from the people who are here? Go ahead. Could you bring a microphone?
Yeah, my name is Charles from Ghana. We know about how strong we feel about our culture, so that when some of these diseases strike, we think it's a cultural issue. I mean, it's something that has happened from our ancestors to punish us. How is that affecting the fight against the disease?
Yeah, well, I'll give you in Sierra Leone the beginning. That was a very serious problem. There is a lady who is very influential in the society among the women, the matured women, and she died of Ebola. But because people never knew what it was, that was the first time we ever had it, they have their own ceremony to perform, and they played with the body, and a lot of people died. What was the explanation? The woman is so powerful that she carried away a lot of people with her. This is tradition. Of course, we had some political undertones, that Ebola was there, especially in the area where the opposition is very strong, to kill some of them. And we are supposed to have a census by December this year. And people misinterpreted it. Even our educated people said that, listen, don't accept it. They are just here to create problems. Don't accept. So we had that very serious challenge to change the mentality. The last one we had, which is more disastrous in one of the districts in the stronghold of the current government is that somebody said there was a plane crash. Some witchcraft. The plane crashed and a lot of people died, and so they were dying. They didn't want to think that it was Ebola. So really, tradition, culture is playing a significant role. That is why the issue of sensitization, to make sure that people understand and accept. And if you look at the statistics, you will see it very clearly. The death rates and survival rates depends on the human being. If you accept and you take early treatment, you are likely to survive. The differential between survival and death rates are narrowing as people are now accepting and appreciating and taking early treatment. So that's how it is.
In the case of Liberia, we had some of the similar problems. Our infection also came from Guinea. We have, if you look at the geography, our countries are touching each other, and the towns are very close to the border. Now, when you talk about border, you can't. I cannot talk about border in the same sense that you do, because there are so many entry into these countries through the official, other than through the official border. But let's just talk about those towns that are on the border. If there is a funeral in my town, the people from the town across from me will come. We're related in many cases, same people, different countries by markings given to them. And that is what happened in the case of Liberia. Liberians went from this town into Guinea to attend a funeral, and exactly as my friend here said, there were those ceremonies of traditionally preparing the body for burial, which they participated in. When they came back across, within days, everyone in our case had died in those towns. We lost all except a child. And we'll talk later about the many children that we have now whose parents have all died. So we have all of the Ebola orphans. But in that town, everyone died. For us, it was the great loss of our human population, but it was also something that hit one part of our country that is a major food producing, major agriculture land. Of course, all of those farms are abandoned. I just want you to remember one thing about the agricultural part. We also had, apart from over 9% growth, we have dropped now. We downgraded it once to 5 point. Now we are downgrading again to 2.1%. I hope it doesn't go any more. But we also had attracted to Liberia $17.6 billion worth of foreign investment, of which almost $7 billion were in agriculture. All of those agricultural investors have, of course, left. They are continuing to pay, many of them, their workers, but there are no activities. And we had just reached the point of beginning to build the mills, in the case of oil palm, for exporting and producing local commodities. So those things are all abandoned. So yes, from one end of the country to the other, we had problems explaining to our large rural population what Ebola was. Many of us didn't know about it ourselves. I happen to have been in Eastern Africa working with the UN at the time Ebola hit Uganda. So I had an understanding of what the disease was. But it took a long, long time. People are just now beginning to understand that it is real and it kills. Maybe in the beginning, if we had just stuck to those two phrases, Ebola is real and Ebola kills, instead of all the long explanation of the monkeys and the bats. And now that they have understood it, we're beginning to see drops in rates.
If I could,
Could you?
the question was if you could address why it is important to assist West Africa at this point.
Yes. Well, you know, when you look at the Ebola infection across West Africa, it's now 7,200 people infested. The highest deaths have occurred in I believe, in Sierra Leone, where I think 13 out of 14 districts have been reported to have the infection. Only one district is not. Now, our institution is not humanitarian in the sense that we do not provide emergency assistance. That is done by the World Food Program. We are into investments. And when we look at the agricultural sector, already, as I said in my keynote, 40% of farms have been abandoned in areas that are affected for fear of contracting the disease or for fear of whatever. But what you immediately see, a very, very interesting case, and this is very important. Apart from the disease spreading outside of West Africa into Europe and into the United States, a good example of the impact, regional impact, the Futajalan region of Guinea produces potatoes, and the market is mostly in Senegal. Now, farmers have not been able to sell. This time last year, I think August, September last year, the Futajalan region, farmers exported about 250 tons of potatoes to Senegal. This year, they've only been able to sell or export 22 tons. What has that done? Price of potatoes in Senegal have skyrocketed. Price of potato in Guinea have plummeted because of surpluses. You see the same stories taking place. And I think the impact on regional trade is going to be very, very serious, and the impact on food. And so we believe that, like in any other situation, where you have a crisis, we should begin to plan for the aftermath of the crisis.
And I just add to this, Iowa's rich history is in alleviating human suffering and confronting hunger. And I know that Outreach International, for example, is already packaging meals. They're packaging meals during the World Food Prize, which are being sent to these countries that are most affected. And to hear the stories and to hear the two ministers describe what's happening in the immediate impact, you can see that humanitarian aid is so important there. And in the longer run, this will be not an issue that's just to those two countries. This is an international issue where we need to bring the scientific power of the world to focus on it.
And I actually have a question I would like to pose from Twitter and from email. This comes in from Malaysia, and Dr. Nwanze, I think this might be a good question for you, asking in general, how does the Ebola crisis affect food and agriculture and that side of things?
Well, I think the examples that the two honorable ministers just gave is very clear. You're looking at countries where the population are mostly farmers, small-scale producers. 80% of the population are farmers and small-scale farmers, and they produce. In these countries, they produce 80 to 90% of the food that is consumed. Now, when you already have 40% of farmers abandoning their fields, and we are currently entering the dry season, the crop season is just getting over. So we're looking at a situation where it's going to impact heavily on national food security as well as regional food security because of the intra-regional trade that is taking place, particularly of the neighboring countries. So we're actually looking at a food security situation not only for the three main countries that are infected by the virus, but also the region as a whole. And I think for us, national and international institutions, organizations that target emergency humanitarian assistance, plus the medical aspect of it, the medical treatment, bringing the best of science to bear on the disease, should act now. We should begin to prepare ourselves for the aftermath when the disease is over, whenever it, hopefully before the end of this year. If not, we're actually looking at a major regional food crisis. In some regions, there's going to be a glut of food because they cannot sell. And so prices are going to plummet. In others, there will be a total lack of food in the markets, and prices are just going to skyrocket. I don't think at that stage it's going to be food assistance. It's basically we have to put in place the necessary strategy to begin to plan for the future before we get there.
Yeah, Jeff.
So, what plans are in place to work on farmers? What plans are in place to start to subsidize for farmers that have been affected by Ebola? I know you mentioned 40%. I think in Kanima, I think it's even higher than that have abandoned their land. And not only have they abandoned the land, you have a situation where the traders are taking advantage. Prices, I think, have tripled in terms of rice. So the farmers not only don't have a crop and abandon everything they're dealing with, but now it becomes a life and death situation, even if they don't have Ebola. So what plans are in place to try to help make things right, or at least have a reasonable price for the farmers affected by Ebola to be able to feed themselves and their families?
In the case of Liberia, we have a food transfer system because, again, with Liberia, in 2006, we didn't have the farmers there. They were somewhere in refugee camps. We had to bring them back, slowly encourage the movement back into the field. Key, important point, we had, after those long years, no germplasm. There was not even a seed of rice to put in the ground. There were no animal life. So we started from scratch. We got certified seed, foundation seeds from abroad, which we ourselves, there was no time to be a minister. Thank God, Macaulay and I, we carried that title, but we are both agricultural scientists, and we work at that. So we ourselves and our colleagues, our few colleagues, we all worked in the field to spread those beginning things or seeds around, planting materials around. Today, just before Ebola hit, we already were self-sufficient in seed production. So we, right off the bank, we saved $3.5 million from buying seeds from abroad. We also were self-sufficient in to the extent that the World Food Program, which operates under the Purchase for Progress, no longer had to buy rice from outside. They had 100% of their supplies, and this has been since 2010. They were able to buy all in the country. So we were blessed in that regard. We had local stock. We had local stock for school feeding, for girls take home, for our supply to those in refugee settlements still in our country. We didn't have to import that. And then we had saved on 30% of the importation with local rice. We had a credit program with small farmers. We provide you the certified seed, you plant, You keep 80% for your own use, economic use, social use, whatever, seed, and you return 20% so that I can share it with other farmers. Immediately, the Ebola struck, I did two things. Number one, we stopped the payback. We left the food with the farmers. We left the rice, 100%. And the advice, keep some for seeds if you can, but make sure you have food to eat. The second thing, we, as a government, worked through the World Food Program to obtain permission to take all of that food that we're keeping for school feeding and put it into feeding our people that were hungry, would be hungry. So there is a food transfer. We don't have right now that problem of people not having anything to eat because their fields were abandoned. We cannot keep that up much longer. So we're hoping that.
Let me just add to that, in case you're not aware of it. IFAD has decided to work with the World Food Program because they have the logistics, in terms of distribution food, and we're providing a grant. But the World Bank is also doing much more. I think the World Bank provided the first grant of about $200 million to World Food Program and the African Union to help provide food, seed items, and also we're working with the Sierra Leone government because the Sierra Leone government already is already putting in place an agricultural recovery plan post Ebola. I think also Liberia is doing the same, and we're working with them with existing projects that we are financing, where the projects have stopped because of the crisis, but the funds are available, and these funds are fungible within the country when you have crises like this.
What steps are in place to make sure that the World Program is actually getting directly to the people? Many in Sierra Leone are concerned about that. They fear not seeing it directly. I mean, there's other different levels, but if there's a strict checklist or what's exactly...
Well, it's unfair to him.
Maybe the ministers can answer.
It would be unfair to ask him. Let me tell you, from a country where we work very closely, I don't know where you're getting that, but that is not the case in Liberia.
Thank you.
The World Food Program and all of our development partners, whether the money is coming from the World Bank, the U.S. government, or IFAD, or WF, all of these programs are coordinated by a disaster committee headed by our president. And we all work together. So when a truck leaves, all of the food is either in one of the Ministry of Agriculture warehouses around the country or centralized warehouses in the capital. When a truck leaves, it leaves under the directive of the government of Liberia's relief program, not anybody else. World Food Program brings the food, they put it in those warehouses, and we work together on the distribution. And the truck will have on it World Food Program, Ministry of Agriculture, whatever. It's coordinated. So it's unfair to them. So I know it's not true in Liberia.
Well, I think I need to throw some light. In Sierra Leone, once the Ebola problem had reached a dimension which is multidisciplinary and multi-institutional, to the extent that it's beyond health, the president took the mantle of leadership and now set up the presidential task force on Ebola. And besides, we do have the Emergency Operations Center, which is the technical wing of the fight that is really responsible for monitoring, surveillancing, and preparing reports and making recommendations to the presidential task force on how to take the fight forward. And I'm part of that presidential task force. Now, whatever comes from that center, you also have at the district level similar structures being replicated, established at that level, and there is line of communication direct between the headquarters in Freetown to the districts. And in a similar fashion, the districts level is being replicated in terms of representation. At the national and the district level, the ministries of agriculture and health are very, very key. The reason, agriculture, for us, we are almost everywhere. Closer to the farmers, closer to the people. We have been going to them. They have more confidence in us who have been interacting with them. Unlike the health workers, the farmers were meeting them on need basis. And so they had more confidence. That's why the fight, it is not health alone. It is agriculture and the health. And as I said, the bulk of the people affected are farmers. So agriculture is not behind, but on the side with health. And there are all modalities being put in place to ensure that there is a proper flow and accountability for the items that are sent down.
Question.
How is this affecting your business?
Well, I did say that the place that the Ebola started in Kanayo and Kenneth, those two districts, they are responsible for producing about 90% of our agricultural exports, like cocoa and coffee. So that's the situation, and the farms have been abandoned, and especially the cocoa and coffee farms, and even food production farms have been abandoned. Some families have been wiped. Some villages, some farm settlements have been wiped away. It is very serious. And so you can imagine how it is negatively impacting.
I mean, what's the little that we produce, the countries that we sell to, are they accepting it?
Oh yes, we don't have the problem is about the quantities which are affected by the production level because of the situation. They are accepting that. What is the concept here? Do you think that the produce will carry the Ebola across? No.
So, some people might have that.
No.
Let me just add something here. I believe that we should all understand that Ebola can be cured, Ebola can be controlled. And it's a question of timeliness of action. I mean, there was an Ebola case in Nigeria. I mean, if you've read the international press, it tells you what Nigeria did. Unlike most diseases, they have an incubation period. And Nigeria was able to deploy a unit that is already been prepared for monitoring and controlling polio outbreaks, funded by government, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I've forgotten a couple of the donors, I think DFID as well. And a part of this unit was immediately deployed the moment was it Duncan? The first Sawyer, please, Sawyer for us, Duncan for the U.S., was infected. And they were able to trace all primary, secondary, tertiary contacts, a couple of thousands of individuals, even with the nurse who was infected and ran to Port Harcourt in the east. They tracked everybody, and they monitored them and started treatment immediately. Before you got to that threshold level, when the infected individual becomes infectious. And so that since August, there has not been any case of Ebola in Nigeria. It can be controlled. Now, we're dealing at a situation in the epicenter of these three countries where, as a matter of the tradition and whether people believed or not, it had gone past that stage where infection was transmissible. And you must also understand that the medical services in both Liberia and Sierra Leone are not properly equipped, where you have one doctor per 1,000 or 2,000 people. So there is a problem there as well. So Ebola can be controlled, but the patient or the infected individual must be identified before they become infectious and either isolated or treated. I think the Nigeria case is a clear example of how efficiently tackling this problem at the very start can save thousands of lives as well as millions and billions of dollars.
Okay. And I think with that, we actually need to wrap this up because we have a couple of engagements for people here, but some of them may be around afterwards to answer questions. So thank you, everyone. Is there anything else that anybody, have we covered most things? Yeah. Thank you very much.
I just want to say, Minister Chenoweth has been my friend for a long time. And she was at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and when she got the call from President Sirleaf Johnson to go home to Liberia and take on this challenge, and I see her many years and see what she's doing, and I have such endless admiration for her, for what she had done, and my heart was breaking as I heard her describe what's happened, what this has done to all the work she was doing. but that's so I'm only meeting Minister Sesay for the first time, but since Florence is my very good friend, I just wanted to say how much I respect and admire what she's doing now in the face of this crisis.
And thanks to all of you as we have presented the story. I know it is scary. I know you're sitting there wondering how can they be optimistic, but Sam and myself, we're from the same group of people, same language, and we are very determined or very resilient people. We have not, as ministers of agriculture, put forward a recovery plan for nothing. We will implement that plan because we will end this Ebola story and rebuild our country's agricultural sector.
Wow. Well, for me, I think I just want to suggest maybe 3 or 4 areas of assistance that we need in these countries. First and foremost, there is a UN emergency appeal right now, which needs support. That is to provide humanitarian assistance to the people right there now. This is very urgent. People are being quarantined. That is not allowed to move from one place to the other. They are not doing economic activities. They need food. They need basic items. And that appeal is trying to address that. Secondly, to also help farmers to recover their own activities, to go back to the farm once the situation is improving. I must note that not everywhere is affected, even as Nwanze has said, for Sierra Leone, 13 out of 14 districts are affected. It doesn't mean that the whole of every district is affected. There is a trend. As I said, if you want more information, I will tell you there's a trend in the flow. It does not spread. It follows a road. This is very interesting. For example, you take Liberia from Lofa down to Montserrado. You take Sierra Leone from Kanayo Nwanze straight to Freetown and so forth and other places. So there is a road. After the emergency, we also need assistance to undertake an assessment. To undertake an assessment on the impact and therefore to develop a national agricultural recovery program for us to regain our economies. I mean, we have to understand that agriculture is the mainstay of our economies. If agriculture is down, our economies will be down.
Well, thank you all, and thank you again for helping to educate people as well. I know you all work for very renowned media outlets, and so, it's an important piece to communicate these things. So thank you very much.